It was a race weekend of what was essentially 2 sprint races at the Japanese Grand Prix. Riders were battling both each other and the conditions in the feature race to fight it out for the win, and we had some interesting things to discuss both during that race and of course across the weekend as a whole. So let's take a look at the 5 things we learned from the Japanese Grand Prix. Binder bins it. KTM was running the brand new carbon fibre chassis that Pedrosa tested a few weeks ago, and both Brad Binder and Jack Miller seemed to really like how it was working. It seemed to give them more grip and more confidence, which was good to see. And at the start of the weekend, kind of based on Binder's performance in practice, I personally, as a slightly hopeful Binder fan, was thinking, well, maybe, possibly, he could close that points gap down a little bit if he was a little bit lucky with maybe the other riders crashing and get back into the title fight. It wasn't to be. He did pretty well in the sprint, but in the feature race, he chucked it down the road, a small lock-up on the front brake, and that seals his title hopes, really. He's 118 points behind, and he's not going to catch that back up. So our first title competitor, although it was very unlikely, is now officially out. It means we're down to 3, and the upcoming races are going to be interesting. Digia gets a result. Digia was having a pretty discreet season so far. He's gotten points on occasion, but I haven't really noticed him. He certainly hasn't done anything that, warrants any particular attention, unlike last year, where of course he got his pole position at Mugello and did quite well in that race. But this weekend was different. He was clearly feeling comfortable, looking good on the bike, and he did a very good job to pick up 6th in qualifying, starting from 6th place on the grid, and end up finishing 8th in both the sprint and the feature race. It was overall a good weekend, but sadly I don't think it's going to be enough for Digia to hold on to his seat next year, as it looks like there are better options gunning for his seat at Gresini Ducati. Red flag. The feature race saw a good race that finished at half race distance exactly due to the conditions. The commentators seemed to suggest that the race direction was pushing to get to exactly half race distance so that they could just call it, which is possibly a little bit of a risky move. I'm not going to make a big deal of it, but when you see the likes of Miguel Oliveira, who's normally such a good wet weather rider, voluntarily deciding to get out of the race because he just didn't feel it was safe anymore, you do kind of think, well, maybe they should have red flagged it a little bit earlier and handed out half points or something like that. Either way, I don't think it really hurt or affected anyone. Johan Zarco, of course, crashed, but he was fine. He tried to restart after all. And it was good to see them try and restart the race despite the conditions, but it was not to be. Bit of a shame because I think it would have been a good one. I think Bagnaia would have made a push to try and close down on Jorge Martin, and we might have seen some fireworks there. But it was not to be. And overall, race direction seemed to do a good job on the red flag and safety front. So, yeah. Home podium. It was, of course, both Yamaha and Honda's home race this weekend. Even more so Honda's, as they own the Motegi circuit. And, it was good to see that Honda were doing well. Yamaha did terribly, and we'll kind of ignore that. But Honda did a good job this weekend. Marc Marquez, of course, stood on the podium. He called his podium in the feature race romantic, but says it doesn't affect his future. I actually thought it'd be quite funny if he stood in the post-race press conference or even the pit interview with Simon Crafar and had simply said, oh, it's nice to get this last podium with Honda. He didn't say that. But still, he says that the result doesn't affect his future, which, that makes it sound more and more like he could be heading the way of Gresini Ducati. That discussion about where he's going to go continues on, and it will be interesting to see how it plays out. You'd think that if he were to stay with Honda, that announcement would have been made this weekend, and so it's kind of more and more starting to suggest that Marquez is heading the way of Ducati. Title Tussle Titans. I said last weekend that the title momentum is with Marco Bezzecchi and even more so Jorge Martin, and that continued this weekend, particularly for Jorge Martin. Marco Bezzecchi kind of fell off the bandwagon a little bit. He, of course, had that crash in Q2, which made him struggle a little bit more, I think. He might have been a little bit injured. And so, that's looking less likely for the Italian. He's still got plenty of rounds to try and make up the gap, but he's going to need some good rounds coming up. On the other side, or the other competitor, Jorge Martin continues to close down that gap, just 3 points in it, and it's going to be very interesting to see how he does. Bagnaia is certainly on the back foot and needs to come up with a bit more of a defence if he wants to hold on to his title this year. It's going to be an interesting one, and I think it's going to go right down to the end between those two. Rider of the weekend. For me, my rider of the weekend, Digia was an option. Miller, based on his recent form, did a very good job this weekend. But I think I'm going to give it to Augusto Fernandez for the feature race. He's given KTM problems. He finished 7th. He started down in 13th, so he made up a good number of places. And I think overall did a very good job. And so, yeah, he's going to be giving KTM a headache. They've still got 5 people going for 4 seats, all contracted for next year. So Augusto Fernandez keeps his foot in the door as a rider for 2024. And, yeah, giving KTM top brass a bit of a headache. Struggle of the weekend. For my struggle of the weekend, I'm going to go with Franco Morbidelli. Either of the Yamaha riders could have been my struggle of the weekend. But Franco, he made a weird choice to stick it out on the dry tyres for so much longer than everyone else. I kind of got why some of the runners further back in the race decided to try and go another lap on the dry tyres, just because, you know, the pit lane gets manic in a bike swap, and if you're down the back of the grid, you're going to get caught up in all the traffic going in and coming out. So it makes sense to do another lap and then come in. But for Franco to try and stick it out for that long was just a weird and strange mistake. It was clear it was going to be wet, and it was only getting wetter. So the fact that he stuck it out for that long was just a bit weird. And that's 5 things we learned from the Japanese double sprint race Grand Prix weekend. It was a shame that we didn't get to see the full feature race and see how that played out. But, oh well, that happens sometimes. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. Comment down below anything that I missed, or if you want to discuss any of the points made in this video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next race weekend. Goodbye.